Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. On leaving the synagogue, Jesus entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Simon's mother-in-law lay sick with a fever. They immediately told him about her. He approached, grasped her hand, and helped her up. Then the fever left her, and she waited on them. When it was evening, after sunset, they brought to him all who were ill or possessed by demons. The whole town was gathered at the door. He cured many who were sick with various diseases, and he drove out many demons, not permitting them to speak because they knew him. Rising very early before dawn, he left and went off to a deserted place where he prayed. Simon and those who were with him pursued him, and on finding him said, "Everyone is looking for you." He told them, "Let us go on to the nearby villages, that I may preach there also. For this purpose have I come." So he went into their synagogues, preaching and driving out demons throughout the whole of Galilee. My friends, the gospel of the Lord. I'm sure as all of us realize that we're aware that our world is going through some very difficult times right now. We have coronavirus on top of so much violence and injustice and basic disrespect for life and for our world. And there's a lot of anxiety out there, sadly, even among some of ourselves praying this Mass this morning. Lots of bad things happening to lots of essentially good people. That was the issue addressed by the author of our first reading from the book of Job today. The book of Job was written about 500 years before Christ, and it was written to address this very same dilemma. Why suffering? How can bad things happen to good people? Now, the theology that Job drew from was from the book of Deuteronomy. And in that book it said that the good prosper while the wicked suffer. In Job's world, the common explanation was that suffering was punishment for sin. But Job was a very good man, and yet he suffered greatly. Today's reading that we just heard is a brief extract from Job's anguished response. It's hardly surprising that his suffering causes Job to take a gloomy view of life. He sees life as fleeting and filled with drudgery and anxiety. It's important to understand also that Job's tradition, Job's people, knew nothing about heaven or hell. That meant that since they didn't believe in life hereafter, God had to award the good and punish the bad. But it all had to happen in this life because there was nothing else according to their belief. Thankfully, our Christian perspective adds a new dimension. We have come to believe in the reality of an afterlife. We have been given belief in existence beyond our current world. Jesus Christ himself made this clear in his teaching. He spoke about returning to the Father following his death and ultimately creating a path to that place of peace and reward for his followers and for all good people. In today's gospel passage, we find Jesus, according to Mark, coming to the end of the first day of his public ministry. It was an extremely demanding day. It took place in Capharnaum. He taught in the synagogue in the morning. We heard about that in last Sunday's gospel. He then healed, as we heard today, Simon's mother-in-law. After dark, when Sabbath had ended, throngs of physically and mentally ill people crowded around the door, and he took time to heal many of them. Then very early the following morning, he rose. He left the house and went off to a lonely place to pray, to recharge, so to speak. A busy first day. But Jesus' emphasis in today's gospel focuses on the theme of the first reading, human suffering. Jesus did not accept the view, still common in his day, that suffering was punishment from God. What we see in Jesus' life and ministry is not an answer to the question, why suffering, but his response to actual suffering. That response was a very practical one. In today's gospel passage, we see it. He gave himself over to the sick, and he healed them, one after the other. In doing so, Jesus was showing the compassion of God in the face of human suffering. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who was martyred for his faith in Germany in 1945, was fond of referring to Jesus as a man for others. In all he did, in all he said, Bonhoeffer wrote, Jesus had the well-being of others uppermost in his mind and heart. St. Paul, from whom we heard today's second reading, strove to live his life in a similar manner, so that he might, as he put it today, bring at least some to Christ and to belief in Jesus. Jesus cured some, but not all. Jesus was far more interested in healing as distinct from curing. Ram Dass, an American spiritual teacher in the Hindu tradition, who suffered a debilitating stroke in 1997, makes a distinction between curing on the one hand and healing on the other. Listen to what he wrote. While cures aim at returning our bodies to what they were in the past, healing uses what is present to move us even more deeply to soul awareness, and in some cases, physical improvement. Although I have not been cured of the effects of my stroke, I have certainly undergone profound healings of mind and spirit. Therefore, he concludes, healing can happen without cure. A case in point that I thought about as I was preparing. While working as a hospital chaplain many years ago, I met many wonderful people. Some of them I had the privilege of accompanying to the gates of heaven. Others overcame their sickness and returned to their families. One particular man by the name of Paul sticks in my mind. Paul was diagnosed with terminal cancer. After an initial period of distress, he told me that something amazing happened. As he processed his situation and his life, he made the decision to stop doing everything that wasn't essential. The things in his life that didn't really matter. And he said that his terminally ill life became vital and peaceful. But then the doctors changed their minds. He was not terminally ill. He had a rare but curable disease, a disease that often mimics the cancer with which he was initially diagnosed. And I've never forgotten his words following this discovery. He said, "When we received the news, we were elated. But then I became anxious because I was afraid that my life would go back to the way it used to be." I'm not certain if that happened in Paul's life. Jesus was more interested in healing the soul than in curing the body, ridding people of the ailments that can kill the soul, things like hatred and greed and evil intention, excusing wrong when it doesn't fit my worldview. Go and sin no more was often his advice when he cured and when he healed. And those of you who are parishioners know that I always say that the scriptures must always challenge us, otherwise they're dead. And the question I ask myself today, based on today's scripture, what do I need to be cured from? Physical stuff, I ask myself. But far more importantly, what do I need healing from? And you, what bodily cures do you need? But again, more importantly, what healing should you ask God for? And now we stand to profess our faith. I believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth,